Hello and welcome to Morgan Latif Presents. I'm Oliver Morgan, co-founder and director of Morgan Latif and your host. And today I'm joined by Manfred Kwade, an experienced automotive executive with international experience working as notable companies such as Frasier and Philips Lighting. Today, Manfred talks to us about restructuring in automotive. He starts us in the journey about why companies often go into situations where they need to restructure in the automotive industry, how he would approach a typical restructuring situation, and then talks to us about the leadership skills required to be successful in automotive restructuring. I hope you enjoy. Manfred, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure for me.
So just let's start from the beginning. Many companies now are getting into these restructuring situations, especially with everything that's going on with coronavirus. It's even more relevant. Can you maybe give us a bit of an insight for you, like why you think companies time and time again get into these restructuring situations?
Well, I think from my experience, Corona is not the level that brought the companies into difficulties. It happened before already because when you look at the last, let's say, 12, 15 months, it was recognizable in every region that sales of cars went down. Of course, China is different. If something goes wrong in China, they are recuperating very rapidly. But in other countries, the OEMs and the tier ones, tier twos, tier threes, they were already in a difficult situation. Also due to the insecurity, EVs, yes or no, fuel cell, yes or no. This makes it very difficult to look into the future. And this was bringing lots of problems for the market environment because the consumers, they didn't know what kind of car to buy. And diesel is basically dead. Everybody was beaten up with diesel, which is a pity as far as I'm concerned, because there were two countries in the world, which was France and Germany, who were the leaders in diesel technology. And as far as I'm concerned, there's still room for improvement, but for the time being, nobody is doing research on diesel in Europe anymore. So the OEMs have been building up capacities, the tier ones and tier twos and so on have been building up capacities consequently, and all of a sudden the demand collapsed. Also, let's go a bit back before Corona. Many companies, especially the mid-sized companies and the smaller companies, they are reluctant to do restructuring if not definitely needed. What I mean with this is they keep overcapacity and hope that they're going to get additional business from the OEMs, which can happen, but if it happens, it's going to be for cutthroat prices where the suppliers will not be happy either. And it's like in a vicious circle. You have overcapacity, you get additional business, but for low prices, and it goes down and down and down and down.
So you think it's one is often market demand, which was obviously, like you said, happening in the automotive industry before coronavirus hit, and two is then the poor management. So when you talk about holding additional stock, is it purely just then loss of cash flow and too much inventory that are the issues in these businesses?
There are a couple of issues as far as I'm concerned, because on one side, many companies do not fully understand the market. They do not understand market trends, and they do not understand the developments in different parts of the world. And all of a sudden, they see that their products are no longer in big demand. Second to this, and this happens quite often as well, companies do not have the right products for the market. And to add up, you build up capacity, you build up capex, you spend in capex, and all of a sudden you have capex available, but you do not have products, and then it really starts to go down. And then, depending on where you get your material from, companies do have a tendency to build up huge stock. And huge stock with the changes happening frequently is a good thing because you're on the safe side, you think. On the other side, it's a bad thing also because with the flexibility of the OEMs when it comes to changes, it happens easily that you have lots of stock which is obsolete. And obsolete is lost money actually.
No, absolutely. So it's often a combination of market conditions, too much stock of obsolete products, and then I guess in turn then failing to develop and kind of pivot your product offering to the customer demand that's going to be happening in the future.
And then what I also see, and is it good or is it negative, it can be decided. Many companies, they are over optimistic with the prognosis, what they are able to accomplish. Let me give you an example. I know a company, they had a really interesting product. The market was going for it. And due to the fact that they were located in a high-cost country, they said, okay, we have to fully automate. Now it was a production line with 14 different stations, basically fully robotized and automated. And what happened is, you had a standstill on one station, and everybody told me, oh, Manfred, don't worry, it's only 20 minutes. But you stopped this one station, all other 13 stations have been stopped as well. And it took additional 20 minutes and 20 minutes and 20 minutes in order to get the line running again. So instead of 20 minutes only standstill time, you had to calculate 20 minutes multiplied by 14, which was a significant impact on the efficiency to the negative side.
So these issues do seem to reoccur time and time again. It's amazing that you hear these stories. And as a restructuring executive like yourself, when you go into these scenarios, how do you approach it? Like what's when you go into a new company and it's suffering, it's had some of the issues that you've just identified. You maybe talk us through that.
What I do is I do two things actually. First, I do an intensive, extensive shop floor walk to understand the production, to see what's going on, what's happening. And then I'm having a meeting with the controllers because I want to understand the P&L and I want to understand how was the budget built, how did it happen the deviations came, and where did the deviations come from. And what you see immediately is direct labor, indirect labor, you see material consumption, and you see cost of quality or cost of non-quality. And these are the issues that I'm tackling first and foremost. And in order to do so, it's important that you get the management team aligned behind you. So normally I'm doing a workshop with the management team, and I'm not somebody who says, I've done it all, I know it all. I want to, first of all, I'm a good listener. I'm listening to the management team and try to understand why the company is in the situation in which they are right now. And then actually I say, well, if this is the case, if we have overspending here, overspending there, what is your proposal to make a change? Of course I have ideas, but it's by far more better if the management team comes up with proposals and you say, I haven't thought about this, that's a good idea, let's go execute as soon as possible. And in the end, together with the management team, I'm developing an action plan with action holders, and then it's all about execution and regular review of the actions. And what I expect is commitment from the management team, willingness from the management team not only to talk but to execute. And if something tends to go out of plan, that I'm informed in advance before, excuse my plain English, shit hits the fan.
You mentioned that those aspects that you focus on first, like for example, the cost of poor quality, and why is it that you choose these areas in the first instance?
Cost of non-quality or cost of poor quality as a tier 1 or tier 2, they can really break your neck because if the quality is not right, you get customer quality debt notes. And I used to have a plant in the US, with a turnover of 185 million US dollars. And for a full year, I had 22 million customer quality debt notes. So talk about profit, forget about profit. This plant was in such a bad situation. We had a hard time to pay the bills every month due to the fact that money went away for customer quality debt notes. So quality is of utmost importance if you want to be successful in the automotive business environment.
I don't want to dive too deep into one topic, but just in general, do you think that the cost of poor quality is more of a technical issue or a leadership and cultural issue?
It's first of all, it's a technical issue because sometimes you do overspending in capex, and the equipment is so complicated and sophisticated that the operators do not fully understand on what levers to adjust. That's part number one. Second to this, depending on the area of the world where you're active, the loyalty of the employees is quite limited. And if you do not have employees with a sound knowledge of the production equipment, you will always run behind to beef up the quality. So it's spending in capex, either too much or too less, meaning you do not have enough preventive maintenance, or second, you do not have the right qualification of the employees. So these are the two elements or three elements.
Once you've looked at the, let's say the manufacturing, so how well you're actually making the existing product, what other areas of the business do you follow on to look at?
Well, actually, I'm looking to different elements of the business. I'm certainly a specialist when it comes to plastics. And I have a pretty good understanding on the pros and cons of different manufacturing steps. But I also have a sound knowledge on electronics and standardization. So I'm a big fan to say a company runs better when you have a good production system instead if you do not have no production system at all. Because a production system, this is about standardization, and as a plant manager or general manager, you want the smooth operation, and smooth operation you can only get if you have standardized processes. And this is irrelevant of the industry. Is it plastic? Is it steel? Is it aluminum? Electronics? Whatever. Standards are the must-have in our kind of industry.
Okay. And then do you then go on to look at you mentioned before the product portfolio, we've gone from, let's say, the finance, the manufacturing, in your experience in restructuring, are there also aspects of product management, commercial, that often need to be changed?
I mean, everything starts from project management, actually, because project management is a very crucial and important function. And if you are messing up in project management, this follows you through all the functions in the plant or in the company. And therefore, I insist on an extremely good qualification of the project managers. And they need to understand the technology, but they also need to understand the financial impact of the technology. And in the end, maybe project manager is not the right term for this role. I consider them more like a techno-commercial manager. And they need to be good coordinators. They need to be people who understand the real issues and who can motivate people to work on the issues and solve problems.
I've also heard of several instances where suppliers are working on projects that just aren't profitable. And maybe it's to say, oh, we're working with this particular OEM and it makes us feel good, but actually doesn't really make any commercial or business sense. Is that something you've encountered as well in the past?
I have to say, in my professional background, I was always very lucky with suppliers because I involved the suppliers early on into project management. So I had the core project management team, which was my team, and they had satellites where they were involving the tier 2s or tier 3s. And many of potential problems could be eliminated early on due to the fact that we have been involving the tier 2s and tier 3s early in the project. And we also have been giving them support. Because in the end, as a system supplier, you are responsible for the whole of the product. And if a tier 2 or tier 3 doesn't perform as expected, it comes back to you anyway.
What kind of ways can you get the suppliers along the value chain involved?
Basically, we take the components that the sub-suppliers are going to do, establish a project team with them, and manage the project team the same way we manage the module or the system in our company. So basically, it's a duplication from what we are doing to a tier 2 or tier 3, only on a smaller scale, of course.
Right. In your experience, does it make any difference in terms of the size of the organization when you're going in and how you might approach a restructure?
There's certainly a big difference because in a big company, or let's say 10 billion or 20 billion company, things are a bit easier due to the fact there's an intensive pressure from first the customer, but also from the shareholders. So big companies are more open when it's about change, while smaller companies they have a tendency to see it as an attack on what they have been doing in the past. And that's not what I'm saying, because you did something in the past which was good for a certain period of time, but things have changed, and you have to adapt to the changes. So I would say it's more complicated to do a restructuring in a mid-sized company than it is in a big company.
Okay, and that's often then just to do to the resistance of the leadership and maybe more of an emotional connection. Whereas I guess also in parts of big corporations, they're probably more familiar with other areas of the business or change happening in the past.
Yeah, fully agree. Fully agree.
What about the culture? So I know that you've worked internationally, and that's always something I'm really interested in. So how you might approach a restructure in Europe versus North America versus Asia, for example.
You clustered now Europe, North America, Asia, and so on. That's a bit too one-dimensional because Europe is very complex. And from my experience, the most difficult when it's about restructuring is France, because you have, in the worst case, 6 unions with which you have to deal with, and it's really a fight and a battle that you have to start and to win, and it takes really long time to restructuring in France. The second most complicated is Spain. Then the rest of Europe is relatively easy. When it's about North America is not a problem at all. Latin America is also a bit more complex due to the fact that in many of the Latin American countries, the unions are very close to the politicians. And if you go into a negotiation with unions, most all of the time you have the politicians behind your back or at your back also. China is, or let's say Asia is relatively easy. Talking about Europe, Switzerland is also not the easiest thing in the world. There's a big similarity to the US, but still there's a difference because in Switzerland it costs money.
Do you think it's purely a union discussion, or is it more of a cultural discussion? And if it is cultural, how does your leadership's approach? Like, do you have to show more empathy, for example, or communicate differently with different people?
It always depends on level you are talking with. Because you also need to understand what interests does an employee have. And the lower the individuals are qualified, the more concern they have. The higher they are qualified, they say, well, I couldn't care less because I work here, or if I cannot work here, I work somewhere else. So this is something you have to manage. And second to this, um, you have to adapt to the regional differences. And you need to understand how people are reacting um, to different approaches. For instance, in South Europe, there's a tendency that the general manager is not one of us, but he's an enemy. And to break this perception, this is the most critical and most important thing. When it's about US, it's relatively easy. Latin America, it's important that you get the management team fully committed, and the management team needs to work with all the employees to bring the message across what needs to be done and how. I can give you one example. I had a big plant in Receiver, and due to the fact that the products were too costly in the meantime at this factory, the decision from the group was to transfer these products to Asia. Um, we did a very open communication with all the relevant stakeholders. Yes, we also offered them a financial package, which was really attractive. We had regular communication meetings in person. Um, and in the end, this was the smoothest transfer and closure of a plant that I ever have been seen. There was not an issue with a strike. There was not an issue with lack of quality due to lack of motivation. The employees were working till the last day of the plant opening, and we supported the employees intensively to find a new job. And at the end of the production in this factory, already 70% of the employees did have a proposal for a new job. So this is the way you have to do it.
We focus on, I think, initially a little bit more on the technical aspects. You're touching here on some of the leadership aspects in a restructure or transformation situation. You said maybe they're clear communication, but could you maybe articulate, in your view, from an executive in this situation, what would be important purely from a leadership perspective?
From a leadership perspective, it's, as far as I'm concerned, of utmost importance to be transparent. And when you bring a message across to the employees, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be open, and they have to have the feeling that you do not have a hidden agenda. If they have the feeling that you're lying on them, it's the worst that can happen. And you need to tell them as much as you can without jeopardizing the restructuring. And you need to show empathy, and you also need to let them know that you and the company will do whatever is possible in order to help the employees to get a smooth landing and help them with an alternative employment someplace else. This is the important thing. And if you come across as arrogant, I know it all, I did it all, forget about it, you die.
Why is that? What is it that's so important?
They need to see that you don't feel power by closing a plant or laying off people. They need to feel that you have an empathy for what's happened to them, and they need to feel that they can trust you and that you are willing to help them. This is important.
So clear communication. You're saying you can't communicate too much. Is that always possible though? Surely sometimes there's a balance there.
Of course, it's a balance, and I'm always saying in such situations, communication, communication, communication. But if you cannot speak about something, don't speak about it and say, well, different things are in progress. I'm going to inform you in the next 2, 3 weeks. Take your time. Uh, let the employees know that you take them serious and that you understand the level of insecurity that such decisions are creating for the employees. And if you cannot speak about something, don't speak about it, but be as open and transparent as you can.
How important? So when you say about communication, I get that you have to communicate the reasons why that you're having to come in and make these changes. How much do you communicate about what the future will look like, the vision, and where you're going?
Well, this is actually what I call manage hope and fears. Because when you inform the employees, well, listen, product ABC is going to be transferred to so and so, or the factory is going to be closed in 12 months, 15 months, whatever, this creates fear. And then it's important that in parallel to the fear, you are able to create a vision of hope. Hope for everybody. It might be that you prepare a nice financial package for them. It might be that you help them with new employment with another company, or it might be that you offer them employment in another factory. So this is the hope factor. And things are running pretty much easier if you can reduce the level of fear by creating high level of hope. But also here it's important, um, creating hope doesn't mean you create a fantastic vision where you know from the beginning you cannot materialize this. If you bring something across when it comes to hope, you need to be sure that you can realize what you're telling the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also mentioned about your leadership team, and just whilst we're focusing on leadership characteristics, when you're assessing the leadership team that's, let's say, your direct reports, what is it that you're looking for from them, from a skills perspective, mainly a leadership perspective, that will you'll be confident that they can drive the change effectively with you?
Well, first of all, when I'm assessing a leadership team, I'm looking at the leadership team from my point of view, and I want leaders that are different than I am. Because if everybody would be the same way that I am, we wouldn't be progressing forward. Second to this, I'm looking for a balanced management team with different experiences, um, with experience in different departments. And it's always good if some of the team members of the management team have already had hard times, maybe in this company or a different company, so that they know what's coming. Um, from a leadership style, I'm also expecting honesty, directness, and directness. I haven't mentioned this. It's important that the managers are direct. They need to talk open and straight, because this is what's appreciated from the employees, and this is something I'm appreciating from my management team. And I'm spending lots of time with my management team to discuss the situation of the company, to create an atmosphere of idea generation, discussing the ideas, and then put it together and get the buy-in of all my managers. And then the buy-in is granted, then it's about execution. So I do not want managers that are hiding behind their desk in the office. I want managers that have the guts to go to the people, to talk with the people. And I can tell you, this is never nice, because you have to accept that we're talking about the well-being of families, the well-being partly of a region. So as a manager, you need to be strong enough to put the facts on the table directly with the employer. And what I hate is, and this is something I would never authorize, is if a manager brings a negative message across via email. Because it's important to do it in person, and if you cannot do it in person, due to the fact that the business is global, then you need to do it at least by video.
Yeah, that's I can imagine that's really important, not only from a personal perspective, but you don't want your message to be misunderstood. And I think if you don't do it in person, you can fail to get their trust and buy-in.
Sure. And honestly speaking, when you do it by email, you do not have the guts to stand for what you need to do. And either you are convinced that it's the right way forward or you're not. So person to person is the ultimate.
One thing you've not mentioned, which I come across a lot, is a sense of urgency and also of the ability to follow up. So is that something as well that you feel would be important?
Um, yes, it's a two-folded element because sense of urgency, yes, but we shouldn't forget that in automotive industry, you need to get the buy-in and the permit of the customer. So this means you have to go through release processes if you transfer products. You have to get authorization if you choose for another supplier. So this is a time-consuming process. Sense of urgency, what you can do rapidly, it's going to be done rapidly. Reduction of the goods in-house, potentially switching to vendor-managed inventory, um, potentially flexibility of the working hours so that you uh, have a buffer of 5, 6, or whatever hours in a week, depending on the workload or even reduction. So what can be done rapidly is being done rapidly. And the easiest thing, it's not the maximum you can get, but it's important as well. It's a signal to the workforce um, to save on discretionary costs. So this means travel expenses, this means office material, this means you know it all. It's only in the whole context, it's a micro element, but it sends a message to the employees.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Well, Manfred, thank you so much for your time and insights today. If our viewers and listeners can take away any key points around restructuring and the important leadership elements, what would you want them to remember?
Um, what I was elaborating earlier, it's a clear and transparent communication. And better do communication more than less. Besides this, you need to work intensively with your management team because as a leader, you can have the best ideas, but you cannot do it alone. So you need to keep the level of your management team high. You need to coach them, and you also need to give them a shoulder to lean on if things are too rough. And then, last but not least, even you as a leader, you need to go there where it really hurts. You need to go to the employees and hear the word of the mouth directly from you. So for me, the utmost importance, communication.
Thank you very much. Again, appreciate your discussion today. Thank you so much, Manfred.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.